Casino employees have been watching you lose money on the wrong games for multiple times. In this video, we'll reveal 9 specifically unique slot machines sitting on casino floors right now that former employees say actually give players a real shot at winning big. And what they exposed about the last machine on this list is going to question everything you thought you knew about gambling. These are the land-based slots that give players the best chances, and we are going to explain why each one made this list. Let's start with number 1, which is called Piggy Bankin' Breakin'. Former casino employees often bring up this game when discussions move past hype and focus on slots that don't punish you the moment you sit down. When you start playing, the first thing you notice is how calm it feels compared to most modern slots. Coins land, piggy banks appear on the reels, and instead of everything resetting every spin, you can actually watch value sit there and grow. Spin after spin, those banks slowly fill, and you're aware the entire time that something real is building on the screen, not just flashing and disappearing. That changes how you play almost immediately. You're not chasing a single moment. You're sitting there watching those banks get heavier, knowing that when the break symbol finally shows up, everything that's been stored is going to come back to you at once. When it happens, it feels earned because you've watched it accumulate. What a lot of players don't realize at first is that if someone gets up and leaves before those banks are broken, nothing resets. The coins stay right where they are. Former floor staff say this is one of the few modern machines where simply paying attention matters. Sitting down at a piggy bankin' break-in that already has value on the screen doesn't guarantee anything, but it does mean you're not starting from zero, which is a rare feeling in a casino. Once you finally get into the pig bonus, that same steady rhythm continues. Different pigs start landing, and you feel the difference immediately. Some of them pay the moment they appear, adding credits while they stay locked in place. Others open up a second screen, which gives the bonus more room to breathe instead of forcing everything into one short burst. And then there's the pig that doesn't seem like much at first, until the bonus ends and it suddenly repeats what you've already won, sometimes turning what felt like an average bonus into something noticeably bigger. What stands out is that you're getting paid during the bonus, not just waiting for a final reveal. Even when things don't line up perfectly, value still comes back to you along the way, which takes a lot of pressure off every individual spin. The base game supports that pacing as well. Wins aren't constant, but they show up often enough to keep your balance from collapsing while you wait for the banks or the bonus to develop. Wilds appear regularly, line hits do just enough work to slow things down, and the game never feels like it's rushing you toward a breaking point. People who've spent time around these machines often describe Piggy Bankin' Breakin' as a slower, more patient game. Not one that promises huge swings, but one that spreads value out over time instead of forcing you through long stretches of nothing just to stay engaged. That makes it easier to play within a budget without feeling like you're constantly on the verge of busting out. Former casino employees don't talk about this game like it's some secret gold mine. They talk about it as a machine that lets you play without feeling manipulated, where progress is visible, bonuses don't feel all or nothing, and attention actually helps instead of hurting. And in a casino full of games designed to rush you, that alone makes Piggy Bankin' Breakin' stand out. But here is something you need to know about one of the Asian-themed machines on this list. Former employees revealed that it has a very unusual feature that experienced players are looking for, and we will get to that in a minute. Machine number 2, Ultimate Fast Cash Dragon Emperor. I know it has a long name, tell me about it, but former casino employees often bring it up for a very simple reason. It's one of those games where something is actually happening while you play. When you sit down at it, the base game immediately feels active. Line hits show up regularly, wild symbols step in often enough to matter, and when you do land a win, it usually gives you back something close to what you put in, sometimes a bit more. You're not sitting through endless dead spins waiting for a single feature to save you. The game does enough work on its own to keep your balance from bleeding out too quickly. That base game support matters because Ultimate Fast Cash is built around momentum. As you spin, special coin symbols start appearing and collecting, and those collections turn into fast cash awards that pay out right away. You're not just watching meters fill for no reason. When those symbols land, you feel it immediately in your credits, which keeps the game feeling responsive instead of delayed. Where things start to get more interesting is how the bonus features layer on top of that. The game gives you two main paths. One is a free games feature triggered by landing enough free game symbols, where the reels open up with a door-style mechanic. As those doors open, they can reveal wilds or coin symbols, and when those coins appear during free games, they can push you straight into the hold and spin style bonus. That overlap is important because it means one feature can naturally feed into another instead of existing in isolation. The hold and spin bonus itself revolves around the fast cash mechanic. Coins lock in place, you get respins, and you're trying to build value across the screen. What separates this from similar games is the fast cash meter. You don't always need a perfect setup to get paid. Sometimes the meter fills and triggers the feature early, and in certain cases even a single coin can split and turn into multiple coins, instantly changing the scale of the bonus. When that happens, it feels less like luck out of nowhere and more like the game finally letting accumulated pressure release. Former slot technicians often point out that this is where the math feels more balanced than usual. The game doesn't force everything into one extremely rare moment. Smaller wins show up consistently, features connect to each other, and when a bonus hits, it doesn't feel disconnected from the rest of the session. Another detail former floor staff mention is how flexible the game is depending on bankroll. Ultimate fast cash is offered in both lower and higher denomination setups, and while it can shine at higher limits, it doesn't completely shut out smaller players. The structure stays the same, the features behave the same way, and the base game still does enough work to keep players alive while they wait for something bigger to develop. People who've spent time around this machine don't describe it as a guaranteed winner or some hidden secret. They describe it as a slot that respects time on device. It gives players action, feedback, and steady engagement instead of forcing them to grind endlessly just to see a feature once. And in a casino full of games designed to make you feel like nothing is happening until it's too late, that alone is why former employees often say, Ultimate Fast Cash Dragon Emperor is one of the machines that's actually worth playing. If you've made it this far, please consider subscribing and let me know in the comments what your all-time favorite slot is and your biggest win on it. Now there is another machine on this list that has a completely different strategy. Instead of accumulating symbols, it does something during regular spins that most modern slots do not do anymore, and that is coming up soon. Machine number 3, Spooky Link Ghost. Before we get to that machine with the unusual spin feature, let's talk about Spooky Link Ghost, because this is one of those machines former casino employees still bring up when they talk about games that surprise them in a good way. It didn't come out of nowhere. People who worked around the rollout say Spooky Link was clearly built on lessons learned from earlier mummy-style Link games. The developers took the features players actually enjoyed, stripped out the parts that caused frustration, and rebuilt the formula with more personality and more ways to get into bonuses. Free games were brought back, jackpot pick moments were added, and instead of forcing everything into a single mechanic, the game gives players multiple paths to stay engaged. According to former staff, it feels like one of the rare cases where designers actually listened to how players behaved on the floor instead of guessing what might work. You can feel that difference almost immediately when you sit down. The base game doesn't feel empty or stalled. Line hits show up often enough to keep things moving, and you're not stuck spinning endlessly just to see something happen. It doesn't feel overly generous, but it also doesn't feel like it's deliberately starving you until a bonus finally appears. Where Spooky Link really stands out is in the hold and spin feature. When ghost symbols land, they lock in place and trigger respins, giving the bonus room to develop instead of ending in a couple of dead spins. As more ghosts land, multipliers start stacking, and the screen becomes more active rather than just teasing a single outcome. You can actually watch the bonus build, which makes it feel less like a gamble on one moment and more like a process unfolding. Former floor managers often point out that this feature tends to show up more consistently than in many similar Link-style games. Not constantly, but often enough that players feel like they're getting real chances instead of endless near misses. When the bonus triggers, it usually has time to breathe, which makes the payout feel connected to the effort it took to get there. Spooky Link also avoids becoming repetitive by layering in additional features. Free games trigger independently, jackpot pick moments change the pace, and jackpot symbols can appear outside the main Link feature, which keeps the session from feeling locked into a single loop. That variety matters more than people realize, especially over longer play sessions. The ghost theme, characters, and animations add charm, but former employees are quick to say that's not why the game works. What makes it stand out is the math underneath. The bonuses don't feel aggressively weighted toward the smallest outcomes, and progress during features feels earned rather than artificially dragged out just to build tension. There's a story former floor staff still like to tell about this machine. Early on, one specific Spooky Link unit developed a reputation for paying unusually well over an extended period. Technicians checked it, expecting to find an issue, but everything was functioning exactly as designed. Instead of pulling it, the casino left it right where it was, because the attention it drew kept that entire section of the floor busy. Even when one machine wasn't performing perfectly for the house, it was driving activity everywhere around it. People who've spent time watching players on Spooky Link tend to notice the same thing. Players are engaged, reacting, smiling, and talking to each other about what just happened on the screen. That kind of energy isn't common on modern casino floors. Whether someone is betting small or playing at higher limits, the structure of the game gives room to enjoy the session without immediately punishing either end of the bankroll spectrum. Former casino employees don't describe Spooky Link Ghost as a miracle machine or a guaranteed win. They talk about it as a rare example of a Link-style slot that delivers on what it promises: steady action, bonuses that don't feel impossible to reach, and a play experience that doesn't rely on frustration to keep people spinning. And in today's casino environment, that alone is enough to make it stand out. Next up is a machine that has been a favorite amongst enthusiasts for nearly 2 decades now. Machine number 4, Twin Win. Twin Win is one of those machines former casino employees often describe as quietly overlooked. It's been on casino floors for decades, it doesn't scream for attention, and it doesn't rely on big bonus moments to sell itself. And that's exactly why people who understand how it works keep coming back to it. When you sit down at Twin Win, the first thing you notice is how straightforward it feels. There's no bonus round waiting somewhere down the line, no scatter chase, no moment where everything hinges on a single trigger. Instead, the entire game revolves around the twin reel mechanic. 2 adjacent reels sync up and display identical symbols, sometimes even extending into a third reel, and when that happens, you immediately see the effect on your payout. What makes this mechanic important is that it's not treated as a bonus feature. It happens right in the base game, during regular spins, which means you don't need to unlock anything special to benefit from it. Those twin reel syncs show up often enough that wins feel like part of the normal rhythm of play rather than rare interruptions. Former floor staff often point out that this design keeps volatility relatively low for a 5-reel video slot. Instead of long dry spells followed by one dramatic payoff, Twin Win spreads its value across frequent, readable hits. You're not constantly waiting for the game to turn on, it's already doing its job spin after spin. As you play longer, you start to appreciate how the split symbols work in your favor. Lining them up isn't especially difficult, and when they do connect across synced reels, the payouts tend to feel fair relative to the bet. You'll notice that your balance doesn't swing wildly. It moves more gradually, which makes it much easier to play within a budget and adjust your bet size without feeling punished. That steady pacing is one of the reasons former employees say Twin Win works well for such a wide range of players. It doesn't care whether you're betting small or playing at higher limits. The structure stays the same. The lack of a bonus round might turn some people off, but for players who value consistent returns over flashy features, that absence actually becomes a strength. Floor managers have mentioned that Twin Win never needed prime placement to perform well. It didn't rely on crowds gathering around a big bonus moment. Players who discovered it would come back specifically because they liked how far their money seemed to go. Watching 2 or 3 reels snap into sync creates just enough anticipation, and more importantly, it pays off often enough that the excitement doesn't feel fake. People who've worked around these machines often describe Twin Win as one of the few video slots that still behaves like a classic game at heart. It's easy to understand, doesn't hide its value behind layers of features, and lets the math do the work instead of the animations. It may not be the most exciting machine on the floor, and it may never be the one drawing a crowd. But for players who care about stretching a bankroll and staying in the game without chasing a bonus that might never come, Twin Win is exactly the kind of slot former casino employees say is actually worth playing. Speaking of reels syncing up, there is a classic 3-reel machine later on this list that does something similar but in a way that is even more player-friendly, and it has been doing it for decades. Machine number 5, Ying Shen. Remember earlier when we mentioned an Asian-themed machine with a very unique feature? This is it. Ying Shen, which translates to God of Wealth, is a machine former casino employees often point to when players ask for an Asian-themed slot that actually feels fair to play. At first glance, it doesn't look especially different from other games in its category. You've got the traditional symbols of prosperity, gold ingots, coins, rich red and gold colors, and familiar music. But once you sit down and start playing, it becomes clear that the game behaves very differently than most modern slots. The base game does a lot more work than players expect. Line hits show up regularly, and there are moments where reels lock or wilds stick in place during normal play. What former employees say really matters here is that those features don't interfere with bonus symbols. Even when reels are held or wilds stay locked, you're still fully eligible to trigger bonuses. That single design choice removes one of the most frustrating mechanics players deal with on other machines and allows the base game to keep your balance alive instead of quietly blocking progress. As you continue playing, you start to notice that the game isn't forcing everything into one rare moment. Wins come back often enough to slow losses, which makes it easier to stay patient without feeling like the machine is actively working against you. When bonuses do trigger, Ying Shen opens up in a way that feels genuinely rewarding. One of the bonus paths uses treasure chests to trigger free games, but it doesn't stop there. Re-triggers add more spins and can even add additional play screens, turning a single bonus into a multi-screen experience. If sticky wilds or held reels appear during the bonus, they stay active for the entire feature, which dramatically increases the potential without making the outcome feel random or rushed. There's also a second bonus that plays very differently. Coins fall onto the screen in a hold-and-spin style setup, and as columns fill, they grow and eventually merge into a large wheel spin that awards either credits or progressives. The bonus takes time to build, which keeps players involved instead of simply watching an animation play out. Former floor staff often mention how consistently positive player feedback was around this game, not just from one type of gambler, but across different budgets and play styles. Casual players enjoyed how long they could stay in the game, while more serious players appreciated that the features didn't feel artificially restricted. What really sets Ying Shen apart, according to people who worked around it, is that the game doesn't rely on frustration to create excitement. It rewards attention, allows features to interact naturally, and avoids many of the blockers and dead-end mechanics that quietly drain players on other slots. People behind the scenes often describe it as one of those rare machines where both sides are satisfied. The casino sees steady engagement, and players feel like the game gives them room to play, breathe, and actually enjoy the session without constantly fighting the math. That balance is why Ying Shen earned such a strong reputation among regulars, and why former casino employees still quietly recommend it to players looking for a slot that doesn't punish patience. But there is a fruit-themed machine coming up that has an even better mechanic for building anticipation, and the way it locks symbols will remind you of Piggy Bankin' Breakin', but with a twist. Machine number 6, Triple Stars. Triple Stars is one of those machines that casual players walk past without a second thought, but former casino employees tend to notice immediately. It doesn't flash, it doesn't shout, and it doesn't promise life-changing jackpots. What it does instead is something far more rare on modern casino floors. It lets people play for a long time without getting punished for it. The game itself is about as straightforward as it gets. A classic 3-reel setup, familiar symbols like stars, sevens, and bars, and no layers of features stacked on top of each other. You spin, the reels stop, and you know exactly what just happened. Former floor staff often describe it as a true grinder machine, built for steady sessions rather than dramatic swings. Where Triple Stars quietly shines is in how the wild star symbols behave. When they land, they don't just substitute, they multiply wins, and they do it often enough that you actually feel the effect. Those multipliers create moments where a regular-looking spin suddenly pays more than you expected without requiring a rare trigger or a separate bonus round. It's a simple mechanic, but it shows up frequently enough to matter. People who've worked around these machines point out that the lack of a traditional bonus round is actually part of the appeal. There's no waiting for a feature to unlock the value. Everything the game offers is already active in the base play. That keeps volatility low and hit frequency high, which is why bankrolls tend to last noticeably longer here than on most modern video slots. Former slot attendants have mentioned that triple stars performs consistently across different casinos and cabinet styles. Whether it's an older upright machine or a newer cabinet with updated screens, the underlying behavior stays the same. That consistency matters to regular players, because once you understand how it plays, you're not relearning the game every time. You see a different version on the floor. What surprises a lot of people is how often these machines still get solid line hits. You don't need perfect alignment or rare symbol stacks. The payouts aren't explosive, but they're fair, readable, and frequent enough to keep momentum going. Over a longer session, those steady returns add up in a way that feels much more controllable than chasing a big bonus elsewhere. Former casino employees often say, triple stars keeps players comfortable, not locked in by frustration, not overstimulated by features, just relaxed enough to keep playing. That's why casinos have kept these machines around for so long, and why newer variations keep getting released instead of disappearing. It's not the kind of slot that's going to make headlines, and it's probably never going to be the loudest machine on the floor. But for players who care about stretching a bankroll, understanding what's happening on every spin, and avoiding the emotional roller coaster of modern bonus-heavy games, triple stars is exactly the kind of machine former casino employees say is actually worth playing. Now, we have 2 more machines until we reveal the final one you've been waiting for. Machine number 7, Super Hot Flaming Pots. This is the machine we teased earlier with the symbol locking twist. Super Hot Flaming Pots is one of those machines former casino employees often describe as a quiet standout. It blends a familiar fruit slot look with a modern pot collection system, and because it doesn't lean on a licensed brand or over-the-top visuals, a lot of players walk right past it without realizing what it actually offers. Once you sit down, the structure becomes clear pretty quickly. The base game feels solid on its own, with line hits showing up often enough to keep things moving. Wild symbols still behave generously, filling entire reels when they land as part of a winning line, which helps maintain momentum without forcing everything into a bonus chase. The heart of the game, though, is the Flaming Pots feature. When pot symbols land, they lock in place and trigger respins. Each additional pot that appears also locks and resets the respins, giving the feature room to build instead of ending abruptly. Former floor staff often point out that this system feels more honest than many similar hold and respin games, because it regularly allows players to fill multiple positions before the feature runs out. What makes Super Hot Flaming Pots especially satisfying is that there's no extra condition required to collect what you build. Once the respins end, whatever pots you've locked in automatically pay. You're not waiting for a separate break symbol or a final trigger to unlock your win. That alone removes a lot of the frustration players experience on other banking-style games, where value can sit on the screen without ever being awarded. The newer version adds another layer through the Super Lantern feature. When it activates, it can introduce double or even triple pot setups, and as columns fill, multipliers kick in. Each completed column can double its value, which changes the scale of the bonus without fundamentally altering how the game plays. Former technicians often mention that this was a rare case where a new feature was added without gutting the base game to compensate for it. That balance matters. In many modern slots, adding an extra bonus means something else quietly gets worse. With Super Hot Flaming Pots, the underlying math of the base game remains largely intact, which is why the overall experience still feels familiar to players who enjoyed the original version. Former casino workers have also noted that these machines are often placed outside of prime traffic areas. They don't need crowds to perform, and they tend to attract players who already understand what they're looking for. Because of that, casinos have less incentive to squeeze them aggressively. The players who find Super Hot Flaming Pots tend to stick with it and the game rewards that patience by staying consistent over longer sessions. It's not the easiest bonus on the floor to trigger, especially with the Super Lantern. Feature and lower limit players may need a bit more breathing room in their bankroll to really feel it out. But compared to other games in the same category, the balance between base play and feature payoff feels unusually fair. Super Hot Flaming Pots doesn't try to reinvent slots. It takes a structure players already understand, layers and features that actually pay when they appear, and avoids the usual traps that turn long sessions into quiet losses. That's why former casino employees still point to it as one of those machines that's actually worth sitting down at, especially if you're looking for something that rewards steady play instead of pure luck. Before we get to the last machine on this list, let's jump to the placement strategy casinos use for revealing something important about all the machines we have covered. Machine number 8, Double Diamond. Double Diamond is one of those machines former casino employees mention almost instinctively. Not because it's flashy or exciting, but because it's been doing the same thing in the same way for decades. And it still works. At its core, Double Diamond is as simple as a slot machine gets. 3 reels, familiar symbols, no bonus rounds, no progressives, no side features pulling your attention in 10 different directions. And that simplicity is exactly where its strength comes from. Every spin resolves immediately. You're never waiting for the game to open up or turn something on. What keeps people coming back is how often the game gives something back. Smaller wins show up regularly, enough to slow losses and keep sessions steady instead of chaotic. Former floor staff often describe it as one of the lowest volatility games on the floor, meaning your bankroll tends to move gradually instead of swinging wildly. The key mechanic that drives that experience is the diamond wild. When a single diamond appears as part of a winning line, it doubles the payout. When 2 diamonds land together, the win is multiplied even further. Those multipliers turn otherwise modest line hits into moments that actually feel meaningful without requiring rare symbols or special triggers. The game doesn't need a bonus round because the excitement is already built into the base play. Former slot attendants have pointed out that Double Diamond has stayed on casino floors for so long precisely because of this balance. It keeps players engaged without putting the casino at risk. People sit down, play for long stretches, and feel like they're being treated fairly, even if they're not walking away with a huge score. There's also something former employees quietly note about where you tend to find these machines. Double Diamond doesn't need prime placement. It's often tucked toward the ends of rows or in quieter areas of the floor, because the players who want it already know to look for it. The game doesn't rely on impulse play or first impressions. It relies on familiarity. That placement pattern isn't unique to Double Diamond either. A lot of the machines former employees recommend, the ones that stretch bankrolls and offer steady action, tend to live away from the entrances and the loudest sections of the casino. The high visibility spots are reserved for games designed to grab attention fast. The quieter corners are where the grinders end up. Former technicians are also careful to make one important distinction. When people talk about Double Diamond, they're talking about the original, no-frills version, not the deluxe variations, not the ones bundled into other bonus-heavy games. The appeal is the pure format. 3 reels, diamond multipliers, and nothing extra layered on top to change how the math behaves. Double Diamond doesn't promise big moments or dramatic bonuses. What it offers, instead, is consistency. For players who value control, understand what they're betting on, and want to avoid the emotional roller coaster of modern slots, it's exactly the kind of machine former casino employees still say is actually worth playing. Now, let's talk about the last machine on this list, which is called China Shores, and why that action-stacked symbols feature is so important. China Shores is a game former casino employees bring up surprisingly often when the conversation turns to machines that actually feel fair to play. It's been around for a long time, it doesn't chase trends, and it doesn't rely on flashy branding to stay relevant. But behind the scenes, it earned a reputation for one simple reason. It keeps players engaged without draining them too quickly. The structure of the game is straightforward, but very intentional. During regular play, entire reels can fill with the same symbol through what Konami calls action-stacked symbols. When that happens, the screen suddenly feels alive. You're not waiting for a bonus to turn the game on. Meaningful wins can happen right in the base game, and they happen often enough to matter. Those stacked reels show up randomly during normal spins, not behind a scatter trigger or a special feature. Former technicians explain that this was a deliberate design choice. Instead of forcing players to chase, one rare moment, the game spreads its value across frequent, visible outcomes. That's why China Shores rarely feels flat, even when you're not in a bonus. The free spins feature builds on that foundation instead of replacing it. When it triggers, the same stacked symbol behavior becomes even more pronounced. Entire reels of higher-paying symbols appear more frequently than they do in the base game, which gives the bonus room to develop instead of ending in a few empty spins. Re-triggers are possible, and the bonus can stretch on longer than players expect, which is part of why people remember it so clearly. There's also a choice element inside the bonus that gives players a sense of control. You're able to decide between more spins with a lower multiplier or fewer spins with a higher one. Former casino workers say that choice doesn't change the math dramatically, but it changes how the bonus feels. Players stay more engaged because they feel involved instead of just watching. An animation playout. Another detail former staff often point out is how forgiving the base game feels. Line hits come back frequently, many of them close to the bet amount, which makes it easier to stay balanced while waiting for a bonus. Pandas, tigers, and other animal symbols line up regularly enough that players don't feel ignored by the game. Because of that balance, China Shores tends to keep people seated. Former floor managers have mentioned that it consistently ranks high in time on device, not because players are chasing losses, but because the game provides enough steady action to stay entertaining. People don't feel rushed off the machine. There's even an old floor story that still circulates among casino staff. China Shores was so popular in one property that management deliberately limited how many units they put out. Not because it wasn't performing, but because too many players were choosing it over newer, less forgiving machines. The few units that stayed on, the floor were almost always occupied by regulars who were willing to wait rather than switch to something else. China Shores doesn't promise massive jackpots or instant wins. What it offers instead is consistency, clarity, and a pace that respects the player's time. That's why former casino employees still quietly recommend it, not as a miracle machine, but as one of the rare games that does exactly what it appears to do. If you want to see which modern slot machines you should avoid completely, check out the next video where we expose the worst traps on the casino floor.